Module 2, Unit 3, Understanding Ourselves in a Social Context. Understanding oneself in a social context is a fundamental aspect of social psychology. The concept of self-concept is central to this understanding. Self-concept refers to the beliefs and perceptions individuals hold about themselves, encompassing traits, behaviors, and roles. It is the mental image or perception that one has about their unique identity. Self-concept develops through various means, including social interactions, feedback from others, introspection, and the internalization of societal norms and expectations. It is shaped from early childhood and continues to evolve throughout life. For instance, a child may initially see themselves as simply a member of their family, but as they grow older, their self-concept may expand to include being a student, friend, or athlete. People come to know themselves by observing their own behavior and by reflecting on feedback from their social environment. This process is explained by self-perception theory, which posits that when internal cues are weak or ambiguous, people infer their own attitudes and feelings by observing their behavior and the context in which it occurs. For example, when Linda was a child, her parents gave her a small monetary reward for good grades. This modest reward was likely designed to avoid the over-justification effect, where excessive external rewards can undermine intrinsic motivation. Instead of working hard solely for a large monetary reward, Linda might infer that she values learning and achieving because the rewards were minimal. Thus, her motivation remained intrinsic. Similarly, the most effective way to increase volunteerism is to encourage it while ensuring that the choice to volunteer remains free and voluntary. Another way people come to understand themselves is through self-awareness theory, which suggests that when people focus their attention on themselves, they evaluate and compare their current behavior against their internal standards and values. This self-scrutiny can lead to changes in behavior if there is a discrepancy between one's actions and one's standards. For instance, Jake, who has just failed a psychology exam, is loudly complaining about his professor's unfairness. However, when he sees his image on a security camera, he becomes self-aware and starts to question whether he studied enough for the exam. This moment of self-reflection prompts Jake to reassess his behavior and consider his role in the outcome. People also learn about themselves through social comparison. According to social comparison theory, individuals determine their own social and personal worth based on how they stack up against others. This can be upward comparison, where one compares themselves to someone they perceive as better, which can inspire improvement but may also lead to dissatisfaction. Conversely, downward comparison involves comparing oneself to someone perceived as worse off, which can enhance self-esteem but may also lead to complacency. For example, Kevin, who received a low grade on his term paper, might compare himself to his peers. If he has a fixed mindset, believing his abilities are static, he might give up, feeling he is inherently a bad writer. However, with a growth mindset, he could see the low grade as an opportunity for growth and improvement, motivating him to put in more effort. Self-control, another significant component of self-understanding, refers to the ability to regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in the face of temptations and impulses. Self-control is essential for achieving long-term goals, and it requires effort and mental resources. For instance, thought suppression, where individuals try to avoid certain thoughts, is much like self-control in that both consume mental resources and can be exhausting. This explains why people might struggle to maintain self-control over an extended period, especially when they are already fatigued or stressed. Research has shown that people are more likely to succeed at self-control when they practice it regularly and have a clear, achievable plan for managing temptations. For example, someone trying to avoid eating junk food might succeed by keeping healthy snacks readily available and planning meals ahead of time to avoid impulsive eating. Conversely, people are more likely to fail at self-control when they are mentally depleted or when the temptations are immediately accessible. In such cases, the mental resources needed for self-regulation are reduced, making it harder to resist temptations. Understanding oneself also involves constructing causal theories about one's behavior and emotions. This process is often unconscious, but can be brought to the forefront through introspection or feedback from others. For instance, Barbara, who arrives home in a bad mood, becomes aware of her emotional state only after her husband asks why she seems upset. She then constructs a causal theory that her bad mood is due to being hungry and tired, providing an explanation that aligns with her understanding of herself and the situation. These self-perception and self-reflection processes can also be applied to managing behaviors such as bullying. Based on the principle of insufficient punishment, a mild punishment that barely gets a bully to stop the behavior, combined with consistency in this approach, can be effective. If the punishment is too harsh, the bully might only stop to avoid the punishment, not because they believe the behavior is wrong. On the other hand, a mild punishment forces the bully to internally justify why they are not engaging in the behavior, leading to a more profound internal change and a decrease in bullying over time. Impact bias is the tendency for people to overestimate the duration and intensity of their future emotional reactions. For instance, upon not being accepted into a dream college, people might initially believe they will be devastated for a long time. However, based on the impact bias, it is likely that they will get over it more quickly than anticipated, demonstrating the human capacity to adapt emotionally to setbacks. Unit 4. Cognitive dissonance and attitudes. Cognitive dissonance is a central concept in social psychology that describes the discomfort or tension people experience when they hold two or more contradictory beliefs, attitudes, or behaviors simultaneously. This discomfort motivates individuals to reduce the inconsistency and restore a sense of psychological balance. For instance, George, who considers himself an honest person, experiences cognitive dissonance when reminded by his brother that he has occasionally kept extra change from a cashier or used office supplies for his personal business. This contradiction between his self-image as an honest person and his dishonest behaviors creates discomfort, prompting him to either change his behavior or justify it to reduce the dissonance. Cognitive dissonance operates in everyday life and affects decision-making, belief systems, and attitudes. People often attempt to avoid cognitive dissonance by seeking consistency between their beliefs and actions. When faced with new information that conflicts with existing beliefs, individuals may try to dismiss or rationalize the conflicting evidence. For example, if someone loves eating bananas but reads a report stating that bananas are bad for their health, they may reduce the dissonance by questioning the validity of the research rather than changing their eating habits. This response protects their existing attitudes and behaviors, allowing them to maintain consistency without feeling the discomfort of cognitive dissonance. MRI research has shown that people experience pleasant feelings when they reduce their dissonant feelings. Cognitive dissonance can also be reduced through a process called attitude change. Attitude change is one of the most common outcomes when individuals seek to resolve dissonance. This change can occur through various means, such as altering one's attitudes to align more closely with their behavior or adopting new beliefs that support their actions. For instance, someone who believes strongly in environmental conservation but drives a gas-guzzling car may experience cognitive dissonance. To reduce this discomfort, they might change their attitude by convincing themselves that their car's emissions are not significantly harmful, or that they compensate for their car's impact by recycling more often. There are different kinds of attitudes, and they are generally based on three components: cognitive, affective, and behavioral. A cognitively based attitude is grounded in the appraisal of beliefs about an object's properties, such as factual information and knowledge. For example, someone might hold a positive cognitive attitude toward a smartphone brand because they believe it has the best features and performance on the market. In contrast, affectively based attitudes are rooted in emotions and feelings rather than objective evaluations. These attitudes are not governed by logic, making them resistant to change through rational argument. For instance, Samantha enjoys gummy bears, and her attitude toward them is affectively based because it is driven by emotional enjoyment rather than any rational consideration of their nutritional value. Behavioral-based attitudes are formed based on observations of how one behaves toward an object. This perspective aligns with self-perception theory, where individuals infer their attitudes from their behavior, especially when their attitudes are ambiguous or weak. For example, if a person notices they frequently volunteer at animal shelters, they might infer that they have a positive attitude toward animal welfare. This type of attitude formation is crucial in understanding how behaviors and attitudes are interconnected, especially in contexts where people seek to align their attitudes with their actions to maintain cognitive consistency. One significant phenomenon related to cognitive dissonance is the Ben Franklin effect, which demonstrates how behavior can influence attitudes. The Ben Franklin effect is named after an incident where Franklin asked a favor from someone who had treated him coldly, and in doing so, turned that person into an ally. This effect occurs because, after performing a favor, the person experiences dissonance if they still hold negative feelings toward the recipient. To reduce this dissonance, they may change their attitude to see the recipient more positively. This phenomenon illustrates the power of cognitive dissonance in reshaping attitudes and social relationships based on behavioral actions. Cognitive dissonance theory also explains why persuasion efforts sometimes fail. When people are faced with persuasive arguments that contradict their deeply held beliefs, they are more likely to experience cognitive dissonance and react defensively. For example, Amelia attempts to persuade Ricardo, who has no firm basis for his belief that women should be restricted to the home, using logical arguments. Despite her well-reasoned points, Ricardo remains unpersuaded because logical arguments rarely work on emotionally based attitudes. This highlights the importance of understanding the basis of attitudes, whether cognitive or affective, when designing persuasive messages or campaigns. Emotionally based attitudes can also be formed through classical conditioning. Classical conditioning occurs when a neutral stimulus becomes associated with a significant emotional response due to repeated pairing with another stimulus that naturally evokes that response. For example, if a child gets bitten by a dog, unconditioned stimulus, causing fear, unconditioned response. Later, the mere sight of any dog, conditioned stimulus, triggers fear, conditioned response, due to the association formed with the painful experience. It is generally assumed that attitude change leads to behavioral change. Therefore, millions of dollars a year are spent on advertising to try to effectively change attitudes on a mass scale. To do so, persuasive communication strategies must consider the underlying basis of the audience's attitudes. For instance, if an advertising campaign aims to promote a new product, understanding whether the target audience's attitudes toward such products are primarily cognitive or affective is essential. If attitudes are cognitively based, the campaign should provide logical information about the product's advantages, such as cost-effectiveness or superior quality. However, if attitudes are affectively based, the campaign should focus on emotional appeals, such as using uplifting music, attractive visuals, or values that resonate with the audience. Resisting persuasion also involves understanding and applying various strategies to avoid cognitive dissonance and attitude change. People can resist persuasion by bolstering their existing beliefs, questioning the source's credibility, or focusing on arguments that support their current attitudes. For example, when people are exposed to persuasive messages that challenge their beliefs, they may engage in counter-arguing, mentally rehearsing reasons why the message is wrong, or focusing on evidence that reinforces their initial position. This resistance to persuasion is often rooted in a desire to maintain cognitive consistency and avoid the discomfort associated with dissonance. Overall, understanding cognitive dissonance and attitudes is crucial for comprehending how individuals navigate their beliefs, behaviors, and emotions in social contexts. Cognitive dissonance theory explains the discomfort that arises from inconsistencies between beliefs and actions, and highlights the strategies people use to reduce this discomfort. Attitudes, whether cognitive, affective, or behavioral, are shaped by various factors and are central to how people perceive and interact with the world around them. By examining these concepts and their applications, social psychologists can better understand human behavior, decision-making, and persuasion dynamics.